Hello Year 7, and I thought that in addition to just recording an audio PowerPoint or just sending you some notes to do, I'd record my face so that you can see it's actually me talking and try and keep this as normal as possible. So well done for finding the link, and apologies for the new beard, which is the lockdown beard, but let's focus on the lesson. So the lesson today is on extremism. Now I'd like you to write your title, your WALT and your date, hopefully in your exercise book, but if you don't have your exercise book, neatly on paper or on a Word document or similar. But do make sure you are writing your title, your date and your WALT. Not this date, which is when I'm recording it, but your actual normal date of your day today. So today's lesson is on extremism. This is part of the Islam unit. And the WALT is to explain reasons and causes of Islamist extremism. Now, I haven't said Islamic extremism. There's a difference in those terms because Islamist describes a particular view within Islam, a particular extremist view. So please make sure you write it correctly. Explain reasons and causes of Islamist extremism. And the WILFs, so the different constituent parts of the lesson, are identify links between extremists and Islam. I'm going to focus specifically on the UK as much as possible. Make links with the Quran and quotes and teachings within there. Now, it's not necessarily accurate of a whole book to take out a few quotes, but I'm going to explain it as best I can. And then take all that together and then reflect on your own opinion. Watching this PowerPoint video and writing down notes and tasks shouldn't take you any longer than an hour. If it does, that's up to you, but please stick to the timings that I explain so you don't feel like you have to do hours and hours and hours. There is an Extremism Essentials video. If this feels like too much information for you, then stop this video and go to that one. Entirely up to you. This just gives more detail and more information and where the information has come from. So if you want to go to that video, please do so, but this is extra challenge if you like. So the starter task for you is to pause this video and go and find out and note down what the terms jihadist and extremism actually mean. Two extensions. The first is to then go and find out, by the by, if you do an extension task, as I've said before, write EXT in your book so I can see who's doing the extension task when I mark them. So the first option for the extension is to find out about the London Bridge attacks in the UK in 2019. What happened? Who, I should say who, not how, my goodness. Who carried it out, and what, if any, are the links to the religion of Islam? Or, what does jihad mean, and how might the majority of Muslims interpret this in a peaceful way? The hint for that is to look at the two different terms, lesser and greater jihad. Lots of information there. The first and most important one is to go and find out what the terms jihadist and extremism mean, and write them down in your book. So pause the video now, go and find those. Okay. Next task is and I don't think you can copy it from a video unfortunately, but just retype in that link, or maybe you can, I don't know. The subheading is The Jihadis Next Door. Now this was a documentary on Channel 4 in 2017, and I'd like you to watch this clip and in a few sentences can you explain what this clip shows about the relationship between extremism and Muslims in Britain. Now, I think there's a fair reflection of the attitudes, how many people agree and disagree with it, and what it means to most Muslims in the UK and the link with extremism. And so I've put there to consider what people are doing, numbers of people, different opinions, and the strength of reactions as well. So pause this video, go and watch that video, and then in your book write a few sentences to explain what this clip shows between the relationship between extremism and Islam in Britain. Welcome back if you just watched that video. I'm going to give you some evidence and facts and pieces of information here. Again, just for your information. If you want to write them down, you're more than welcome to, but actually when it comes to the reflect on your opinion task at the end, you are going to use evidence and facts in that anyway. So just listen. Okay, the first one is an example of terrorism on September the 11th, 2001, and I think this is the most important example, actually. So in 2001, there was a coordinated terrorist attack that occurred in the USA. It's called 9/11, including 2 planes flying into the World Trade Center or the Twin Towers, killing 3,000 people. The extremist group, Al-Qaeda, claimed responsibility for the attack. This has led to a global war on terror, but since 2001, the number of Islamist, jihadist, terrorist groups has more than doubled, as a direct reaction to the Western response to the attacks. So it's all very complicated, but essentially what you need to know is that before September the 11th, 2001, there wasn't a huge and significant link in most people's minds between the word Islam and the word extremism, but that's increased, and the reasons and causes are complicated, but the important thing really is to know that it is still a tiny minority of people, and they would be called Islamist, jihadist, terrorist groups. Notice that I've called Al-Qaeda an extremist group, not an Islam group. It's important that when you're writing stuff down to make that distinction. Okay, some global stats, just FYI. And this is, again, I've quoted all the sources just so you know, and it's important to know that these all come from reputable sources. This is from the Institute for Economics and Peace, and there's some information here. Deaths caused by the 4 biggest Islamist jihadist extremist groups in 2018. These are the Taliban, ISIL, Islamic State and Boko Haram, were 9,223, and that equals 57% of total terrorist attack deaths. The most affected countries were Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria and Somalia, all with a majority Muslim population. So Islamist extremist attacks most often occur in countries that are majority Muslim. The attacks are categorized by this Institute for Economics and Peace as political rather than religious attacks. Quite an important point, that. Some stats from Britain. 15 terrorist attacks in Britain were carried out in 2018, including the Westminster attacks. And some numbers for you, just in general, to give you an idea of the number of Muslims in the world and in the UK. In the UK, as of 2019, there are 2.6 million Muslims, and globally 1.8 billion, and both of those two figures are growing as well. So here's some important quotes and teachings and facts, some more facts, I guess. You can write them down if you want. I just want you to listen, really, and then use these in your answer at the end. So the first from fp.com is this: the clear majority throughout the Muslim world consists of Muslims who are loyal to the core creed and teachings and worship devoutly but are not inclined to practice violence or even intolerance towards non-Muslims. Such an important point. A couple of quotes from the Quran, the Islam holy text, putting the apostrophe in the right place. It says, first of all, Muslims should strike terror into the hearts of the enemies of Allah and your enemies and others besides whom you may not know but whom Allah does know. Now that is a quote that can be interpreted by some to incite violence. Again, link that with the top quote. It's a minority who interpret that, and lots of people think they're interpreting that incorrectly. Second quote: you may fight in the cause of God against those who attack you, but do not aggress. God does not love the aggressors. So essentially it's saying that violence might be justified, but in self-defense. Another important quote from the former British Prime Minister David Cameron, who said this: Simply denying any connection between the religion of Islam and some extremists doesn't work, because these extremists are self-identifying as Muslims. That's why we're doing the lesson, because it's important to understand the link. And another quote from a Parlo, P-A-R-H-L-O, which is a liberal Pakistani organisation, said this: according to the Quran, jihadi radicalists have broken one of the most important commandments about peaceful relationships with other nations. Lots of different views within the 2.8 billion Muslims in the world. 1.8. What am I talking about? So, bringing all of that together, this is what I would like you to do. I would like you to pick one of these statements and explain your opinion. You could agree or disagree, but I'd like you to try and use and reference some of the information, some of the evidence, and some of the quotes from the lesson. So I'd like to see a couple of paragraphs, really. Quotes, information, and your opinion all together. And you pick one of the following. Extremism is not a religious, but a political problem. You could pick Islam is a religion of peace, or Islam is not a religion of peace, or extremism is a religious problem. Well, pick one of those. Try and bring as much information as I've talked about together as possible. Remember, you can just go back and forward. It's a video. And write it neatly in your book. And thanks for listening. If this is too much, then go back to the Extremism Essentials video and use that instead. But this is a challenge video to give you more information and detail. So, when you've finished, take a picture of your book or send me the Word document in the assignments section so I can give you an effort grade. Thanks very much, Year 7.